of what options we provide to people. We don't have good public transportation. We don't have, good grocery stores in poor communities, and we don't have places for people to exercise. I mean, so I think that's important that we remind people of that, but I don't think that that's a part of our health platform in terms of providing people access to the things.
All right, what you just said is where I want the show to go, and go in the last 10 minutes, and that is the findings this week that were released by the United States Census Bureau on new figures on income, earnings, poverty, and health insurance. In Susan Eisenhower's speech last night, she talks about her grandfather's visit by Robert Frost, the poet. And Robert, this was at a point where the United States was mired in its war in Korea. And Robert Frost turned to President Eisenhower and said, "The strong are saying nothing until they see." The strong are saying nothing until they see. Yesterday, I saw something in the U.S. Census Bureau report that was released on the figures on poverty. And what I see were new divisions, divisions that have never been deeper in income, earnings, finance, credit, healthcare, etc. It seems to me that so much of this is driven by poverty. You talk about the epidemic of violence in the inner cities. That's a public health issue. Mm-hmm. You talk about not having access to fresh fruit and vegetables in the inner city. That's a poverty issue. You care to comment, Dr. Fagan?
Well, I mean, I think it's right there. I mean, we have a widening, as you say, a widening gap in terms of disparity of income in this country. And, we are increasingly a nation of the haves and have-nots. And, we made a decision as a nation that everyone should have access to public education. We have not made a decision as a nation that everyone should have access to high-quality health care. And, you're right. This is, you could say that housing is a tremendous public health issue, because if I could talk about, what happens with people who have asthma, who have chronic diseases, who live in crummy housing, and how it makes it almost impossible to get a handle on their health problems as a result of the housing that they have. Are we as a nation ready to take these issues on?
Well, that's sort of the contradiction here, namely, on the one hand, this growing movement for universal health care and the recognition, as you are recognizing, both of you openly, the integral relationship between poverty and health. So we have that on the one hand, and on the other hand, we have a 25-year consecutive performance of stratification of the classes, perhaps at historical records that we've hardly ever seen before, if ever. We've gone from 1% of the America's population controlling 22% of the nation's assets in 1972 to that same 1% now controlling 39% of the nation's assets. So when you have 1% increasing their asset base so significantly from 22% to 39% in a 25-year period, that means that the rest of the population is being squeezed down. It has to mean that. So that means that the people at the poverty level, what you're referring to as the haves and the have-nots have to be increasing. So we have, on the one hand, this stratification with the have-nots significantly increasing over time, and at the same time, and the realization that poverty is directly related to health and health care, and at the same time we're trying to get universal health care through, and we're trying to get it through to a group of people who are increasing their wealth at a disproportionate relationship to to the rest of the country.
Amen, Dr. Miller.
Right. So
it's quite a paradox when you think of it that way, isn't it? Because in a way we're asking, just as you pointed out, Dr. Fagan, that when we ask legislators who are mostly lawyers to make changes about things that are going to affect them, they're not going to do it because they're the lawyers and they're the ones that are controlling the laws, and they're not going to do things that are against their own personal self-interest unless somehow we get them to be more altruistic or humanistic or democratic, if you will. And in the same regard, we're asking the people who are increasing their wealth by leaps and bounds, by statistical leaps and bounds, to give up some of their wealth in the name of a greater good. And these are very deep philosophical questions that we really need to address as a country. I think some are hoping that Obama will bring about this kind of personal or national reflection.
And you can expand that to the globe too, because it's the same issue. If you talk about Americans who have usually fat, dumb, and happy, kind of doing what they're doing, go put one of them in Ethiopia or Darfur and look at the discrepancies in the wealth distribution based on the war machine that we have.
As a matter of fact, if you expand what we're saying to the world, as you suggested, the disparity is even greater. It is that, yes, you're absolutely right. It's that much more. It's that much greater.
So how would the citizens of the United States say, okay, we'll live on 10% of what we make now and give the rest to the world? Is that ever going to happen?
No, that it's unlikely that we have a hard time. As Senator Obama last night talked about, imagining being in someone else's shoes. We as a nation have a hard time seeing through other people's eyes or walking through their shoes. But that's exactly where we are now. See, the reality is